Do you know what it's like to wake up on a normal morning, look out the window and realize that half of your life has been wasted on decisions you would never make again? I know. And I'm not talking about small mistakes. I'm talking about those regrets that are hidden in the wrinkles on your face, in that incomplete smile when you look at old photos. At 83 years old, I carry with me not only the pain in my knees that remind me that I'm getting older, but also the weight of choices that, if I could, I would erase from my history with a breath. I'm going to tell you something I've never revealed in public. Last week, I found an old diary at the bottom of a dusty box. The first pages were dated 1958. My handwriting, still young and hopeful, told of dreams that I never realized. I closed the diary and cried like I hadn't cried in a long time. They weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of recognition, to finally face without masks everything I let pass by. And that's why I'm here. Not to seek your pity or sympathy, but because maybe, just maybe, my regrets can be the map that helps you not get lost in the same dead ends that I did. My name is Carlos, and this is the story of the things I regret in life. My first major regret came early, but I only realized its impact when it was too late. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, full of dreams. I received an offer to work abroad on an exchange program for young talents. I remember the brown envelope on the kitchen table, the official seal, my name impeccably typed. My mother was preparing lunch, the smell of sautéed garlic and onions filling the house. "What's this, son?" she asked, as she stirred the beans on the stove. "An opportunity, Mom, to work in Germany for 2 years." She stopped stirring the pot. She turned to me with those eyes that always seem to read beyond my words. "And you will?" I took a deep breath. I thought about my aging father, the small family business that depended on me, the girlfriend I had just met. I don't know, but I knew. I had already decided to stay. For safety, for fear of the unknown, for comfort. "We need you here," she said, returning to the stove. It wasn't a demand, it was just an observation. And it was enough to shelve that dream. 2 years later, I saw on the news that the company that had invited me had expanded to 3 continents. Some of those young people who had accepted the offer were now successful executives, traveling the world, building international careers. And me, I was exactly where I had decided to be, safe, comfortable, and secretly devastated. If you're watching me right now and you have an opportunity knocking at your door, something that makes your heart race with fear and excitement at the same time, don't do what I did. The fear of the unknown should not be greater than the fear of one day looking back and wondering what could have been. At age 30, the second big regret came. I had gotten married, had a small child, and routine had settled like a heavy blanket over my shoulders. It was a Sunday afternoon in the spring of 1972. We were all at my parents' house for a family lunch. My father called me into the backyard to show me a jabuticaba seedling he had planted. "It won't bear fruit for a while," he said, stroking the small leaves. "Maybe 15 years. I laughed disdainfully. "That long? I don't know if it's worth waiting so long." He looked at me in a way I've never forgotten. "Life is about waiting, son. The best things take time." That same week, I received an invitation to invest in a piece of land. It was a considerable amount, but the region promised to appreciate in value in the coming years. I thought about the conversation I had with my father, about the jabuticaba tree that would take a long time to bear fruit. I didn't invest. I needed the money to renovate the house, to buy a better car, for my immediate needs. 20 years later, that land had become one of the most valued areas in the city. What used to cost the price of an average car was now worth a small fortune. And my father's jabuticabera? It was loaded with dark, sweet fruits, shading the yard where he was no longer. It took me many decades to understand that patience is not just a virtue, it is a life strategy. The best investments, be they financial, emotional, or spiritual, rarely bear immediate fruit. If you are listening to me and you are 30, 40 years old, plant your jabuticaba trees now. Don't wait until you are my age to realize that time passes anyway. But perhaps the regret that haunts me the most, the one that keeps me awake some nights, happened when I was 45. I was a successful manager at the time, respected at work, with a considerable salary. My daughter, Mariana, had just turned 14. She was an intelligent, sensitive teenager with curious eyes that always seemed to ask more than her mouth expressed. I remember it like it was yesterday. We were having dinner and she started telling me about a science project she was doing at school. Something about the impact of climate change on the oceans. Her eyes lit up as she explained the details of her research, the discoveries she had made, the hypotheses she wanted to test. My cell phone rang. It was from work. I answered it immediately, interrupting her enthusiastic explanation. The call lasted almost half an hour. When I returned to the table, dinner had gone cold, and Mariana was no longer talking about her project. In fact, she was barely talking at all. "Sorry, daughter, it was important. You were saying?" She shrugged. "Nothing important, Dad. Just school stuff." That sparkle had disappeared from her eyes. And not just that day. It was that day, and the next, and the next. There were so many calls answered, so many hours at the office, so many business trips, that before I knew it, my daughter no longer shared her dreams with me. She had learned that I didn't have time to listen to them. Today, Mariana lives on the other side of the country. We talk on the phone maybe once a month. The calls are cordial, polite, superficial. I ask her about her work, and she answers, in short sentences. I ask her about the weather, about trivial things. We never talk about her dreams, about science projects, about the sparkle in her eyes again. If I could give just one piece of advice to anyone building a career and a family at the same time, it would be this. No job call, no promotion, no amount of money is worth missing out on the moments when your kids want to share their world with you. Because one day they'll just stop trying. At age 52, I faced a health crisis that changed my perspective forever. He had never been a man concerned with well-being. I ate badly, didn't exercise, worked a lot. I have good genes, I used to say, referring to my father who, despite similar habits, had lived to be 80. It was a Tuesday. I had just presented an important report to the company's board of directors. I sat back in my chair, pleased with the results, when I felt a pressure in my chest. At first I ignored it. It must be stress, I thought. The pressure grew, radiating down my left arm. I broke out in a cold sweat. I had a heart attack, not one of those dramatic ones in the movies, where the person falls to the ground clutching their chest. It was a silent, treacherous heart attack that took me straight to the operating table, and then to 3 months of recovery at home. During that period, forced to stop, to reflect, I realized how much time I had wasted pursuing professional success while neglecting my body. The doctor was direct. If it continues like this, it won't reach 60. I changed some habits after that. I started walking and improved my diet, but the damage was already done. My arteries were compromised, my heart was weakened, and my energy was diminished. Today, at 83 years old, I feel the weight of those decades of neglect with every step I take, every staircase I climb, every daily limitation. Many of you who are watching me probably think the same way I did. I have time. That's an old man's thing. I'm not going to get neurotic about my health. Let me say something with all the sincerity that my 83 years allow me to. Your health is not a bank account where you can withdraw now and deposit later. What you do with your body today determines what your old age will be, whether it will be an old age of possibilities or of limitations. Speaking of limitations, there's one regret that has haunted me like a shadow for nearly 4 decades. I was 47 when my mother began to show the first signs of dementia. At first, it was just small forgetfulness. where she'd left her keys, a neighbor's name, a pot on the stove. I convinced myself that this was normal for a 75-year-old. As her condition worsened, my patience grew thinner. I remember one afternoon when she called me 5 times in a row to ask the same question. On the 5th call, she exploded. "Mom, I already answered that. Can't you remember anything I say?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a small voice, she replied, "Sorry, son. I didn't mean to bother you. I hired a caregiver the following month. I visited my mother on Sundays for 2 hours, always in a hurry to get back to my life. She passed away 3 years later, on a day when I was at a business convention abroad. I couldn't say goodbye. What I wouldn't give today to receive 5 calls from her, even if it was to repeat the same question. What I wouldn't give to have the opportunity to sit next to her, hold her wrinkled hand, and simply be present, without rushing, without irritation, just being grateful for still having her with me. Dementia steals the person we love, little by little. Every day, a piece of them slips away. But what I didn't understand until it was too late is that our impatience, our inability to accept this new reality, robs them of the dignity and love they so desperately need at this time. If you have a loved one struggling with this condition, I beg you, be patient, be kind, be there, even when they don't seem to be. At age 60, I faced another deep regret. I had just retired, full of plans to travel, to visit places that I had always put off due to lack of time. Greece was at the top of the list. Those islands with crystal clear waters, the ancient ruins, the ancient history. Maria, my wife of 35 years at the time, also had her own travel dreams. Paris had been her dream destination since she was young. She spoke fluent French and knew the history of every museum and neighborhood in the city. "Let's go to Greece first," I insisted. "It's better for the summer. We can leave Paris for the fall of next year." She agreed, as she always did. Maria was a woman of compromises, of small concessions that, added up over decades, formed a mountain of unfulfilled desires. We went to Greece. The photos show a smiling couple in front of the Parthenon, sailing through the islands, tasting typical foods. What the photos don't show is that 3 months after we returned, Maria was diagnosed with an aggressive cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone. Paris was just a dream in the drawer. On the day of the funeral, I found a little notebook on his bedside table. Inside, a list of places I would like to visit, things I wanted to do, dreams I never achieved. Paris was first, underlined 3 times. If there is one message I want to leave for couples who are building a life together, it is this: do not postpone each other's happiness. Do not turn the relationship into a competition of who can give in more. If you love someone, put their dreams on the same level as yours. Because time, this resource that we believe we have in abundance, is actually the scarcest thing we have. There is also that more subtle kind of regret that only starts to hurt as the years go by. At 65 years old, already a widower, retired, with my children raised and far away, I faced the void of free time. The hours dragged on, the days seemed endless. I realized with painful clarity that I had not developed any passions, hobbies, or interests outside of work. I tried gardening for a few weeks, then gave up. I tried cooking, then gave up after the 3rd failed recipe. I bought photography equipment that gathered dust on the shelf. Nothing seemed to spark that spark of genuine enthusiasm in me. One day, I ran into an old coworker at the supermarket. He was the same age as me, also retired, but there was one striking difference between us. He radiated vitality. "What have you been doing with your life, Jorge?" I asked, curious about his secret. "I'm teaching history at the university for seniors," he replied enthusiastically. "I've always been passionate about ancient history, you know. Now I finally have time to devote to it." I didn't know. In 30 years of working together, I had never asked him about his passions, his interests. Our relationship was strictly professional. And there he was, fulfilled, connected to something bigger than himself, while I wandered the supermarket aisles like a ghost in search of purpose. Cultivate interests that go beyond your job. Develop passions that can sustain your spirit when your career is over. Retirement is not the end of the road, it's just a curve. And if you don't have a map of interests to follow, you'll get lost on that curve, like I did. There is also the regret of the words left unsaid. I have a brother, 2 years younger. We grew up together, competing for attention, for achievements, for space. When we were young, this competition was healthy. It pushed us forward. Over time, it turned into distance, into silence, into superficial conversations at family gatherings. He went on to become an academic, a university professor. I went on to become a corporate one. There was always an unspoken tension between us. He felt I had sold my soul for money. I felt he lived in an ivory tower, disconnected from the real world. In 2005, he published a book, an academic work on the economic history of Latin America. He sent me an autographed copy. I read the first few pages and put it aside, finding it tedious and too complex for my taste. When we met at Christmas that year, he asked hopefully, "So, what did you think of the book?" "I haven't had time to read it yet," I lied. "You know how it is, end of the year, lots of work." I saw the disappointment in his eyes. A quick flash, then masked by a polite smile. "Sure, I understand. When you have time." Years later, I discovered that the book had been dedicated to me. On the acknowledgements page, which I never read, it was written, "To my brother, who even though he followed a different path than mine, was always my greatest inspiration to persevere." Today, my brother lives in another country. We talk on the phone at Christmas and on birthdays. I never mentioned that I finally read the book, that I was moved by the dedication, that I deeply regret not having valued that gesture of closeness. Pride is a silent disease that corrodes relationships. The words left unsaid, the acknowledgments delayed, the apologies swallowed. All of these build invisible walls between people who should be united. Don't let pride rob you of the chance to say, "I love you, I'm proud of you, I miss you, I'm sorry." And then there's the most recent regret, the one I'm still learning to process. 3 years ago, I met Helena at a seniors group. She was a charming, intelligent woman with a sharp sense of humor and eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 stories. We began a friendship that, to my surprise, turned into something more. At 80, I never expected to feel the thrill of new love, the butterflies in my stomach, the anxiety of a phone call again. But it happened. And it was scary. My children didn't react well to the idea. "Dad, you barely know this woman. She might be interested in your money. What will people think?" And I, who had spent my whole life making calculated, safe decisions, listened to them. I gradually distanced myself from Helena, making excuses, reducing our meetings, until she got the message and stopped calling. The emptiness I felt afterwards was like an abyss opening up beneath my feet. I realized that at 80 years old, I was still letting fear of judgment, consequences, and disapproval determine my choices. I was still putting other people's opinions above my own happiness. I tried calling her 6 months later. The number no longer existed. I discovered that she had moved to live with her daughter in another state. We are never too old for love. We are never too experienced to make mistakes out of fear. If you are in the second half of your life and you have found someone who makes your heart beat faster, don't let the fear of what others will think rob you of the chance to feel alive. Again, looking back now, I realize that many of my regrets have a common root. Fear. Fear of taking risks, fear of changing, fear of appearing vulnerable, fear of the unknown. It's ironic how we spend so much time trying to avoid the suffering that fear promises us, only to find that this avoidance creates much greater suffering in the long run. If I could go back in time, I would tell young Carlos, age 20, fear will always be with you. Don't wait for it to disappear before making important decisions. Learn to take steps with fear, not without fear. There is also the regret of not paying enough attention to the little moments, My daughter's first steps, which I missed because I was in an important meeting. Last Christmas with my dad, when I spent half the time checking emails on my phone. The spectacular sunset in Santorini, which I didn't fully appreciate because I was worried about the restaurant where we had a reservation for dinner. Life is made up of these fleeting moments. And we, so busy chasing the next goal, the next achievement, often fail to be truly present when life happens right before our eyes. Most people think they'll have time to pay attention later, that their little ones will always be around, that their parents will live forever, that there will be other sunsets, other opportunities. And then one day you blink and you're 83 years old, holding yellowed photos of moments you lived but didn't fully experience. Pay attention. Be present. Life is in the details. You may be wondering if I have nothing but regrets, if my life has been a series of mistakes and missed opportunities. It hasn't been. I have had moments of great joy, of deep fulfillment, of genuine connections. I have built a respectable career, raised children who, despite the emotional distance, are whole and successful people. I have found true love with Maria, even if I haven't enjoyed that gift as fully as I could have. But I'm here today to talk about regrets because they're the ones that hold the most valuable lessons. And because, surprisingly, in the last few years I've found a certain peace in facing them head on, in naming them, in sharing them with you. There is a liberation in saying, yes, I messed up. Yes, I regret it. And yes, I'm still here, learning, growing, trying to do better. This brings me to perhaps my greatest regret of all. The time I wasted beating myself up over past regrets. The sleepless nights reliving past decisions, imagining alternative scenarios, torturing myself with what-ifs, as if the past could be changed by the force of my anguish. It took me 8 decades to understand that regret is only valuable when it serves as a compass for the future, not when it serves as an anchor that ties us to the past. That acknowledging mistakes is useful. Endlessly brooding over them is a form of self-punishment that benefits no one. If you are watching me, and you are carrying heavy regrets in your heart, allow me to tell you something I learned too late. Forgive yourself. Not as an act of indulgence, but as an act of courage. Forgive yourself not to forget the mistake, but to free up the energy needed to do better from now on. So what do we do with all these regrets? How do we turn them into something useful, something that can light the path for those who still have time to choose differently? First, recognize that regret, as painful as it may be, is a valuable teacher. It shows us with ruthless clarity what we truly value. No one regrets things that don't matter. Second, understand that it's not the mistake itself that defines you, but what you do after it. There are people who stumble over the same regrets decade after decade, and there are people who use each mistake as a stepping stone to a deeper understanding of themselves. Third, and perhaps most important, there is still time. Yes, even for me at 83, there is still time to do things differently. Maybe not to correct all the mistakes of the past, but certainly to create new chapters that do not end in regret. Last week I called my daughter, not to talk about weather or trivialities. I called to say, I'm sorry for all the times I wasn't really there, that I deeply regret having missed so many important moments in your life, that I'm proud of the woman she's become, even if she hasn't contributed as much as she could have to this journey. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice cracked. Thank you, Dad. I needed to hear that. We talked for 2 hours that day, more than we had talked in the last 5 years combined. At the end of the call, she said, I'm thinking of coming over next month. What do you think? And so a small miracle happened. A bridge began to be rebuilt over the abyss of regrets that separated us. I also wrote a letter to my brother. A long, honest, vulnerable letter. I told him how intimidated I was by his academic success, how my apparent disdain was actually a mask for my own insecurity. How I regret not celebrating his achievements, not reading his book when he sent it to me, wasting decades of potential closeness because of my wounded pride. I haven't heard back yet. I may never hear back. But there's a peace in knowing that I've finally said what needed to be said, that I won't take this particular regret to the grave. What about Helena? Well, after much investigation, I got her new number through a mutual friend. I called her yesterday. When she answered and recognized my voice, I thought she would hang up immediately. But she didn't. "Carlos," she said with polite coldness, "long time no see." "Helena," I replied, feeling my heart pound like a teenager's. "I know it's probably too late, but I wanted to invite you for coffee. I have a lot to explain, a lot to apologize for." Another silence. Then, "Saturday, at 3. Same cafe as always. I don't know what will happen at this meeting. Maybe it's just closure, a chance to say a proper goodbye. Maybe it's a new beginning. Either way, it will be another step towards a life with fewer regrets. And that is what I wish for you who are watching me now. Not a life without mistakes. That would be impossible and even undesirable, because mistakes are great teachers. I wish for a life where regrets are not so heavy that they prevent you from moving forward, from trying again, from taking the risk of being happy. A life where you can look back and say, yes, I made mistakes, but I also got things right. And, most importantly, I lived each moment as if it were unique and precious, because it was. At 83 years old, I understood that time is not a river that carries us inexorably into the future. Time is a circular ocean, where each wave of regret can be transformed into a wave of learning, of healing, of new possibilities. As long as there is breath, there are chances to do things differently. And if today you are carrying the weight of choices that you would make differently, know that you are not alone. We are all in this ocean together, learning to swim between the waves of what was and what can still be. Thank you for listening. Thank you for allowing me to transform my regrets into a bridge to your heart. Perhaps that is the best way to make sense of all that I regret, by using these stories to light the path for those who still have the chance to choose differently. Before I close, I want to leave you with one final thought, something that took me 83 years to truly understand. What you do today will become a memory tomorrow. Choose the kind of memory you want to create. Choose the kind of story you want to tell when you reach my age, because one day, just like me, you will look back. And at that moment, may your tears be more of gratitude for what you experienced than of regret for what you missed. May it be so for all of us. This is my story, with all its mistakes and lessons learned. And if anything I've shared today touches your heart, if a single word helps you avoid regret, then my mission is accomplished. Because in the end, when the curtains close and the lights go out, what remains is not our achievements or failures, but how we touch the lives of those around us. Live in such a way that when you look back as I do now, you will smile more than you cry. Be thankful more than you regret. Life is too precious to be lived in the waiting room of "I'll go someday." That day is today. That moment is now. Don't waste it.